Hi, my name is Ben Atkinson and welcome to the Functional Health Podcast. I interview some of the leading voices in nutrition and lifestyle medicine, and I will share with you their stories, their expertise and their advice, shedding light on the industry from each of their perspectives to help improve your health from today. This week, I'm delighted to share with you my conversation with Tim Gray. Tim is labelled as the UK's leading biohacker and founder of the Health Optimisation Summit. Today, we're discussing how to biohack your health and performance. So, without further ado, Tim, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're so very welcome. It's so good to finally connect with you, man. I know it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, it has been a bit. It's been a busy year, or was the end of the quarter four anyway.
Yeah. No, and just to jump in, I originally got interested in your work because you essentially seem to kind of hit a revelation with your own health, having burnt the candle at both ends and a little bit in the middle, and embarked on a journey of healing, which has led to you to becoming what you presently identify as, which is a biohacker. Now, how did you get into this space?
I just basically got ill, and the doctors couldn't help me. And so I started studying after about a year of just being sent from person to person to person. I just started just being diagnostic and applying business strategy to my own health, basically. And stumbled across biohacking 4 or 5 years later. I'm 10 years in the journey now. And being an entrepreneur, stroke business builder and scaler, I kind of just did that with my own health and then created a meetup and then created the summit. And next thing you know, you're immersed in the industry.
What do you mean by taking a business approach to your own health?
Well, biohacking is a mindset more than anything else. And it's about, how do I put it? Thinking in a systems thinking approach. Optimizing your body based on systems. So, for instance, some of the most unreliable companies out there don't have systems, procedures, structure, proper organization or quality systems in place. They don't necessarily understand how to structure and scale a company properly. And the ones that do obviously flourish and grow the company to be huge. If you go into any big corporation that runs like a well-oiled machine, everything is procedure driven. And nothing's left to chance. Everything's strategic, all the way through down to operational level. And now with most people in the health space, previously they try loads of different things and different medicines, different supplements, and just try for guesswork. They don't actually build out the strategy for their health, looking at the whole overall picture. And when you think about traditional medicine, that's reductionist medicine. So if you've got kidney stones, you go and see a urologist. If you've got brain fog or brain issues, then you go and see a neurologist, et cetera, et cetera. They don't look at the gut to help with brain fog or the gut to help with kidney stones, for instance. So they're not thinking in a systems thinking approach. Whereas for me, I always building companies, I'd have a whole pack of Post-it notes and I would map out all the issues and things, stick them on the wall and then organize them into detail all the way up to abstract, therefore using the data to build the strategy. So that's exactly what I did with my health. A pack of Post-it notes, mapped out every symptom I had and all the data I did have, map them out across the wall and put them into, into an organizational chart until it fed back to an abstract, an initial issue, which I then resolved or worked on. So it's really just thinking in the systems thinking approach.
That's amazing. I've not really heard anyone speak of it in that way before. It's probably good for the listeners that maybe aren't familiar with the term to understand what biohacking actually is and get your perspective on that, because I understand yours is quite unique.
Well, I follow the mindset of several of the big names in health, Dave Asprey being the father of biohacking, who invented the term biohacking officially. And his definition is to optimize the environment inside of you and outside of you to take control of your own biology. And that's for optimal health or performance. Now, mine is very similar to that because it came from him originally. But I like to say using health, technology and nature and all the different modalities to be able to optimize your health and performance. And that does obviously involve optimizing the environment around you and inside of you. So inside of you would be your biology, gut, liver, all these different things, and outside of you would be your home environment or whatnot. So they all really do play a massive part. I think where the biggest issue is that the media tend to think biohacking is gene editing or whatnot, transhumanism, which is chip in plants. It's not. Biohacking in its true sense is optimizing your health and performance, taking control of your own biology, opposed to just listening to a doctor that doesn't necessarily have empathy or doesn't understand the full picture of health because he only prescribes medicine opposed to prescribing nature.
Yeah, it's an interesting way of looking at it, because I think many people can identify with some of the health interventions that you and I have probably used in our life, which would be, for example, intermittent fasting or optimizing sleep, for example.
Yep.
Which could maybe even be considered as a pillar of health, and intermittent fasting could be considered a diet. But as soon as you start tracking these and improving them for maybe optimized hormonal function or insulin sensitivity, it's then qualified as a biohack. I suppose, like you said before, we're doing it for a specific purpose.
A yogi or someone that does yoga or whatnot doesn't consider themselves a biohacker necessarily, but a biohacker would use yoga if they needed to. And again, it comes back to the systems thinking approach. Like someone said to me the other week, well, that's not biohacking, getting your shoes off and standing in the garden, is it? Well, it's not biohacking by itself isolated, but when you're a biohacker and you say, well, actually, I need to reduce inflammation, help reset my circadian rhythm, balance my cortisol levels to be, where they should be through the day, and whatnot, then grounding is a biohack. In the mindset, again, going back to the systems thinking approach.
Right, so it's almost like finding and utilizing or having multiple different tools in the toolkit in case any of these issues arise.
Yeah, exactly. And it's unbiased approach, i.e. if you go to a doctor, he's going to prescribe you medicine most of the time. They might recommend acupuncture sometimes now, for instance, but they are biased to the medical mindset and medicine. If you go to a naturopath, obviously it'd be a more natural approach. If you go to chiropractor, it will be about your physical structure. It's just like if you go to a butcher's, he's going to sell your meat. He's not going to try and sell your broccoli. If you go to a greengrocer's, you can buy the broccoli. He's not going to try and sell your meat. Everyone has their own bias, and biohacking generally goes, what can I use with the goal focus of optimizing my health, whether it be yoga, whether it be Tai Chi, whether or not it be, IV, whether it be stem cells, whether it be any of the free stuff or the expensive stuff. It's like, what can I use to get to my goal? That's it, nothing else.
Right, perfect. And I guess it's key because one of the things that I had written down to ask you is what biohacking isn't, and you kind of you've outlined that quite well in terms of it's not all this technology. You don't have to use it. You can use, for example, one thing which I was thinking of just prior to this call is I use an Oura ring to track my sleep and try and maximize how much sleep I get and track it over time and see what benefits me. But equally, someone could do that, maybe not with the same efficacy, but with a sleep diary. Would you think that's fair enough to say in terms of a low-level, low-tech biohack?
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, things like the Aura, it makes it very accessible for people to be able to track these things on an ongoing basis without putting too much energy or thought into it. I know that if I wear blue blocking glasses 3 hours before bed, my deep sleep and REM sleep is significantly better. My heart rate comes down. You've just got one application to look in for that. Apple Health has tried to do that by bringing everything into one central place, but doesn't really hit the mark. And for many years, I used a spreadsheet tracking 35 plus variables every day to see how my health progressed, but it's nowhere near as good an interface as the Aura Health app for the ring. And, it's just one very easy integrated thing into your life without putting any energy into it, without having all the value. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's for the convenience side. That's one of the reasons why I got it. You don't really have to put any energy into it at all. You can just check the app, see whether whatever intervention you've used before bed has worked over time, and if it hasn't. Now we're on the topic of sleep, we may as well stay on this, because there's so many podcasts out there, including Professor Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep. And he outlines like a few different interventions in there and the importance of sleep. And blue light blockers is something which I've just started using, but I'm not sure many people know what they are or why should they use them. So maybe we should outline that to begin with.
Yeah, it's very simple. Light does different things to us and is essentially energy. Now, we can have good energy and we can have bad energy. We can have good light, we can have bad light. We call it junk light. So, for instance, blue light is very stimulating to us. It stops us secreting melatonin, our sleep hormone. And in nature, blue light is never found on its own. It's only ever included within, more of a full spectrum light. So when we're using devices that have just blue light, we aren't evolutionarily wired to know how to deal with that. So the blue light on its own, our bodies think it's sunrise because it's very blue, which stops us producing melatonin, or should I say excreting melatonin, which keeps us from going to sleep properly or sleeping properly at all. So it's causing a real issue with sleep. With biohacking, it's using technology to mimic a natural environment in an unnatural world. So if you're using technology with blue light, using technology, blue blocking glasses, to block the blue light from going into your eyes, which stops you from stopping you secreting your melatonin, means that your sleep increases significantly. And, actually it's becoming more mainstream with the traditional doctors now even offering melatonin to their clients instead of sleeping drugs, because melatonin being the sleep hormone, as well as many other things like an amazing antioxidant. So having better levels of melatonin works, and blue blocking glasses mean that we secrete it naturally. So that's just a classic example of one of, if there was one biohack I did, it would be blue blocking glasses. If I had to drop everything tomorrow, it would be that one thing. So that's just understanding, optimizing our environment that can really help optimizing the environment inside of us, which gives us better sleep.
Yeah, 100%. And one thing which I've realized as well with using the blue light blockers, and I've also got like a setting on my phone which basically knocks out all the blue light.
It's rubbish. I mean, that will reduce your exposure to blue a little bit, but it mainly just dims it. It's not actually that great.
Yeah, it's not the night shift. It's something else where I basically tap the on and off button 3 times and it goes completely red.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. The thing is, you're still subjected to environmental blue light. So if you're walking around the house with the lights on, then you'll still be getting blue light in your eyes. You just won't be having the main source of it. And you only have to sit in the room with a red light stack for a few minutes for your eyes to get used to the red light. And then when you turn it off, you realize how much blue light there is everywhere. Or when you have your blue blocking glasses on for half an hour, you take them off and you go, oh crap, I can't believe how blue the light is. We didn't evolve with that. We only evolved with campfire after sunset, which is more red, less blue. So, as I say, it really does screw with us, really throws so many things out of whack, and many hormones actually.
Yeah, you're so right. And just from anecdotally, like I remember wearing my blue light blockers and my partner was texting next to me, and then I took them off, and I never knew that the light was that blue before. You just assume like it's a bright white light, but as soon as you've gone from red to back to normal, it's very obvious.
And 100%.
That's something which I find hugely beneficial, which has dramatically affected my sleep, because a lot of people say don't look at screens 2 hours before bedtime, which I try not to do, but it's not always possible. Sometimes I'm sending the last email just before I get to sleep. I know.
No, don't do it. Don't do it. Give yourself an hour to wind down. Otherwise, your adrenaline will be up and your sleep will be worse as a result. It's really important that you don't just respect the light, that you respect the rest of your physiology as well. And your brain will still be switched on, or your body will be switching off, which means that a lot of your unconscious processes or autonomic responses won't be as good as they should be. So, for instance, your heart rate variability won't be as high as it should be if you're working up until the moment you jump into bed. Whereas if you give yourself an hour, it will show you how addicted to your device you are if you can't put your phone down for an hour before bed. It really will. If you're watching Netflix, half an hour before bed is probably pretty much the maximum, the minimum that you'd want to do. Okay. So you'll see a big change in your sleep if you knock that on the head.
I'm gonna have to. I think it's just a case of me probably just getting back into my meditation before bed or mindfulness to clear my mind. Otherwise, I'm a little bit racing thoughts for 10 minutes, which it's bad practice. I always tell people to calm down before bed, have a good bedtime routine, and I seem to slipped into it. I think it's this lockdown, just back into bad habits again. But not perfect 100% of the time. But I'm not sure if I can say the same thing about you, Tim. You seem pretty on the ball all the time at this moment.
Yeah, no, I do my best. It's about mainly around processes and structure and routine that helps you keep on track with things. But no one's perfect. I mean, if I only read for 20 minutes in the morning and says half an hour, I feel like I failed my day, which is quite bad, which becomes stressful. So you have to let go of it to some extent and still just go, hey, what the hell, I'm living. But at the same time, having some routine and structure keeps you on track, which is where you get the compounded cumulative wins,
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you there. Now, just to rewind back a little bit, you spoke about HRV, and it's something which I've not really spoken about on the podcast before in great depth. Could you explain that and how you use it to, I guess, what's the benefit of tracking it, really?
Heart rate variability is one of the best indicators for overall health, in my opinion. And essentially, it's the time interval between heartbeats, which tells you how rested your heart is. It's different to your heart rate. So, for instance, your heart rate would be how many beats per minute there is. It has the lower, the better, within obviously reason, which can be anywhere from roughly 40 up to 80 beats a minute as standard. I find that if I've had a pumped up day, or if I'm working to the last minute before I get into bed, it would be nearer average 72, lowest 65. If I have an hour before bed with no devices and I wear my blue blockers for 3 hours before bed, then my resting heart rate will come down by 10 to 15 beats a minute. And that's partly down to adrenaline. And there are ways of combating that with various supplements like licorice root, or trimethylglycine for me. Anyway, and heart rate variability, generally, if you drink alcohol, you'll see it be very low. It'd be like an average of 10 to 15, which is horrendous. Average around 50 to 150 seems to be very normal. And the more optimized and healthy you are, the higher the average is. I know that if I drink alcohol, my average is 10 to 15 heart rate variability average, which is just horrendous. My friend Sim has well over 110, 120 average, I think, which is quite normal, which is higher than my maximum.
Right. So what does that say about your health if that's higher than your maximum?
Well, it's the interesting thing here. He's 15 years younger than me, number one. Okay. He lives in Estonia on a little island. He writes all day. He doesn't have quite the stimulus that I do. Obviously, so there's the age aspect. And I have had chronic health issues. He's not in biohacking for his chronic health issues, whereas I am or have been. So that's that. And, looking at my heart rate variability and optimizing it is a good indicator for me of how well I'm doing. So when I was traveling this last year through COVID, I actually traveled around Europe for 20 weeks during the year while everyone was locked down. And I was in Croatia for, I think it was 10 weeks or something like that. And when I was living by a beach in a cabin, which is lovely, and my heart rate variability was, higher with an average than my max was before, showing that, swimming in the sea, getting mineral-rich water, being relaxed without having work or anything going on, it really did make a big difference for me. So yeah, and I also noticed that if I have hyperbaric oxygen therapy before bed, because I've got one at home, and if I have magnesium IV before I go to bed as well, not only am I sleep the best, my heart has to work a lot less because I'm oxygenated. The heart doesn't have to work so hard pumping oxygen around the body at such a rate. And I sleep deeper, and also my heart rate variability shoots up like crazy and my resting heart rate comes down. So there are, interventions and things you can do to optimize that, but really it's about homeostasis and trying to get to that point without all of these devices and interventions.
Yeah, absolutely. And just jumping into supplements, and I'll just put a little caveat here that we're not recommending anyone take any supplements without speaking to their GP first, because they have contraindications with medications and certain conditions. But we're going to talk about them now. So like I take magnesium glycinate, for example, before sleep, and I think it's perfect in terms of getting me to bed and to relax my muscles, etc. But you said you take it intravenously. What are you using?
I have magnesium sulfate.
Okay.
I have it IV 2 to 3 times a week. Typically low in magnesium. Right. Anyway, because of my previous gut issues, and antibiotics for too long meant that I wasn't getting it from my food properly, and also various other health issues in the past. So I like IV. Magnesium sulfate hits the mark for me. When you do it, you can feel yourself relax very quickly. I don't obviously recommend people doing it from home at all. Go and see an IV clinic for it. Mm-hmm. I use Harple Clinic down in St Paul's in London. Or I do it when I have a health practitioner here with me, or when I'm in various places around the world with different specialists, because obviously it's my industry, so I'm very lucky to have some amazing colleagues.
Yeah.
But magnesium's a good one. For some people, actually, it can have the opposite effect before bed, though. It can actually be stimulating and it actually ruin their sleep. So it's important to test removing it. It's actually one of my team, when she first started with me, she said, "Oh yeah, my REM sleep is horrendous. I can't seem to ever get it off the ground. I don't know why." I asked her what her routine was like and what supplements she took and things like that. And she said, "Oh, magnesium before bed," and it still doesn't work. And I was like, "Okay, we'll drop that for a few nights and let's just see what happens." And it improved. That was the one thing that she needed to do to improve her REM sleep, was remove the magnesium that she had been told by a practitioner that would do so well. In fact, it had the opposite effect.
That is very interesting. I wonder what the source was, because I know you can get different sources. For example, citrate, which is well absorbed, but also can contribute part of the citric acid cycle and Krebs cycle. Sorry. So yeah, I'm just interested.
I like citrate because it helps bind to oxalates if you would need to be on a low oxalate diet or something or other. That's very good. But they all have their different absorption rates. Some magnesium only has a 5% absorption rate, like magnesium oxide. Citrate is greater than that. But there are some mixed minerals now, mixed magnesium, like Biooptimizers do one that has 3 or 4 variants in it. But you're still reliant on the gut. So that's why I like IV. It's much more chance of getting into the cell. It's still not guaranteed once it's in the blood, but it's at least it gets into the blood opposed to you just pooping it out. So
yeah. Granted, that's not available to everyone, but that's incredibly interesting. I think you've just given me a whole load of work to do myself. I'm reading up on that. But there we go. Anyway, it's something which I've used recently, and I'm not sure, because I know you use different waves of light, like red light therapy and things like that. But I've started using like an alarm clock, which basically half an hour before, it imitates a sunrise. It's called like a Lumi lamp. No affiliation, but
I know Lumi well. They exhibited at my summit last year, and I've liked them for many years actually. They, it works on seasonal affective disorder essentially, but it's still blue light that is stimulating, so it stops you secreting your melatonin, and that's what it does. But it's much better to wake with sunrise naturally. And but the thing is, if you're going to bed at, say, for instance, midnight or 1 o'clock, you don't want sunrise to wake you because it will shorten your natural sleeping cycle. So if you slept at, a couple of hours after sunset, let's just say 9 p.m., you'd have roughly 7 to 8 hours, depending on what your body needs to recover each day. So that would take you through till, say, 5, 6 o'clock, let's say 6 a.m. Mm-hmm. Now, so you should wake at 6 a.m. With sunrise, if you sleep at 9. But if you go to bed at 1 in the morning, which is 4 hours later, and you get woken with sunrise, your body's not getting what it needs to. So it's a very, very quick way of aging rapidly. You reduce your sleep, you age quicker. It's very, very basic, because we sleep to reverse the damage that we've done to our body during the day using the energy that we've collected through the day. Now, if we're sleeping, which is switching off, but we're not having enough time to repair, then we're never going to recover and we're going to age quicker. That's just fact. So that's why if you do have a Lumi light, for instance, you need to make sure it's timed based on how much sleep you actually need, and not just, waking you up because you say you have to get up at 6 o'clock or 6:30 every day, because that would just shorten your window and your age quicker. So that's why I like to work out when sunset is, and then work out how much sleep I need, like extra sleep as a result. So if sunset is at 6 and I go to bed at 9, that's 3 hours. So I need to wait 3 hours after sunrise, basically, which is, so you're mimicking nature, mimicking sunset and sunrise in your own time. Otherwise, you're just going to sleep too little. So I'm a fan of Lumi, big time, especially around seasonal affective disorder, using blue light to help balance hormones and pick up mood and whatnot. For the alarm clock, I'm just not a fan of alarm clocks at all. You should wake up naturally when your body needs to.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still not waking up naturally, so that's probably something I need to work on. But Lumi has definitely helped me in terms of I wake up as the light's coming on, if you know what I mean. So I guess I wake up naturally now, but it's due to the light. So it's probably more natural than the sound. I definitely don't wake up stark awake, like suddenly. So yeah, I think it's definitely, if it's not optimized, I think it's probably it's definitely a benefit. Or how should I articulate this? It's better than the alternative, which is just waking up to a loud noise.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, it's best to wake up naturally. I wake up naturally every single day, unless I've got a flight at, actually I don't take flights early in the morning now. I just have it timed correctly. But yeah, I wake up naturally every single day with what I need. I do use blackout blinds and whatnot, so my room's almost pitch black. So that way I do get the right amount of sleep. But I'm adverse to alarm clocks. I think the sleep should be respected more than anything else.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it's number one. Not enough people rate it, or should I say? I mean, Matt Walker's book, it's a good book. I mean, it made sleep optimization more mainstream. Mm-hmm. I really like it in many ways. I think it has a few things I don't quite agree with, but that's fine to not agree on everything. But he was saying, one thing he does say, and he wears an Oura, I think, is that the Oura ring is around 70% accurate, and compared to the lab testing sleep tracking devices. But if you're sleeping in a lab, it's not your natural environment. So therefore, you're not going to sleep as good as you should. So the baseline of 100% based on their lab equipment isn't necessarily 100%. Is that running at 70% because you're sleeping in a lab, and is Oura actually more accurate? Who knows? But, that's why I think Oura is so good, because it's just so easy integrated and tracks so effectively. And I've tested it against other devices as well. So.
Okay, that's good to know. Because I guess for me, I don't necessarily take the reading day on day. I more track trends, because if I'm using an intervention like the blue light blockers, I'm using them for over a week, probably 2 weeks, and then looking at what the trend is like over the previous 2 weeks. Obviously looking at whether there was something like a friend's birthday and it was late night, and then I try and not include that. Anyway, I've got a bunch of things I want to ask you, and I realise we've already been recording for near enough half an hour, so I'm going to jump on to something else, which is nutrigenomics. So essentially, there are a bunch of different testing kits out there in terms of like DNA testing, and microbiome testing, etc. I was wondering what you thought of them from your perspective, because I understand you're very well read up in this area, and whether they hold any merit from your point of view.
Data. It's data to optimize from. If you're subjective on things, it's about intuition. Intuition is great; it'll get us so far, but the data will get us so much further. That's why they say now data is the new oil in terms of investments. One of the biggest companies with the most data. Look at Facebook, for instance. The more data we have, the more we can do to optimize. And think when you put that to blood tests, yeah, sure, there is how accurate is it, and do they actually find the right things? Well, if you look at microbiome tests, for instance, one day to the next, they can be vastly different, because different foods that you eat will feed different bacteria, so different ones will flourish on a day-to-day basis. But they do actually give you a pretty good indication of trend of what you are actually deficient in, because you know, I've done 10 or 15 of them over my time, and they all paint a very similar picture, except for the odd one. So if you add them all together and divide them apart, then it still gives you a really good trend, which is something to optimize from. But without that, I couldn't say, well, actually, I need, you know, this specific bacteria for my gut. Let's optimize it. I would just be necking kombucha, which is a fancy trend, which isn't necessarily giving me what I need. It might be, you know, putting too much fuel in my car, or, you know, topping up the oil when I need water, for instance. You know, you want to be selective about what you put in, because you can actually cause more problems by optimizing with the wrong bacteria, for instance. But there are tests like the hair mineral analysis tests, which are very good. They're indicative because they show you deficiencies and excesses that you might have. But there again, if you've got something like mercury toxicity because you've had metal fillings or eaten too much crappy tuna for years, then you're not going to excrete certain minerals or whatnot in your hair. Therefore, your hair mineral analysis test will be incorrect. But it still does give you a good indication, opposed to subjective guesswork, as to what you should optimize, and can base assumptions on it. So I'm a big fan of blood tests, obviously, and microbiome tests and genetic tests and all of these things. And it's really interesting to see trends across different platforms and how they overlap. For instance, if I have a mercury or heavy metals test done on urine and one on blood, then, you know, looking at the two differences, and one saying I'm excreting a lot and one saying that I've got low levels, it could be that my body is just clearing a lot. So again, it can give you you can base better assumptions on it, opposed to just guessing, oh no, I haven't got mercury poisoning because I've never had tuna and never had metal fillings. You know, be surprised how many people actually do have really high levels without even realizing it. And when they test, you can see that, and then you could collate the mercury out of them, or work with a practitioner, obviously, to do so. Then their health improves, their white blood cell count comes up to a better level, and they just start feeling much better energy and mental clarity. So without a decent test, you couldn't do that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. When you mentioned overlap as well, I think that's probably key for me. So I've tried a few of these different tests, and I kind of look at which ones overlapping, which ones are saying the same thing, and which ones are a stark difference. And like you said, most of them paint a relatively similar picture, and you can kind of, as you said, modify them. And I think it does take some of the guesswork out. I think it's still very much in its infancy, especially when we talk about genetic testing, because normally it doesn't take into account, well, there's certain ones which you can buy on the market without a practitioner. It doesn't take into account epigenetic markers or anything like that, which are even more hard to quantify. But again, you know, like you said, it's probably a better baseline than some of the guesswork that people have right now. And
100%, yeah.
I mean, what are the ones which you commonly use and would recommend?
Good question. There's a hormone test called the Dutch test, DUTCH, which is from urine, and it looks at your hormones. Very, very good test, actually. I did an Instagram post on it a few months ago, explaining what it looks for and why. That looks at your hormone panel, looks at the different times of the day to see, what your cortisol levels are like, what your testosterone is like at different times of the day and things like that. So it gives you a really good picture. A lot of people that have had chronic fatigue or fatigue issues or, aren't full of energy all the time, it's often very, very valuable to do that test. So that's that. If you've got gut issues, there's one called the GI-FX Comprehensive Stool Test, which is paints a really good picture of your overall gut health, looks at inflammation markers, looks at the bacteria, looks at any bad things that are going on. And that can be bought through Omnos, OMNOS website, as well as the Dutch test as well. Then, you've got one called the organic acids test, which I really like, that looks at different bacteria, yeast markers in the urine. So you can tell you if you've got candida or an imbalance or a leaky gut or whatnot. Also, if you've got oxalate issues or things like that, which is great. So that's another one of my favorites. I've done that multiple times. There's obviously the standard genetics test, which can get you to look at your genes to see if you've got any specific variations for detoxification issues and whatnot. So you can then supplement the right supplement to get those genes turning on and off better. And then there's one, my very favorite of all, I think, is called the Nutra-Eval test by Genova Labs. That looks at it's a metabolomics test. It looks at you on a cellular level, looks at what's in the cell, what's should be coming out of the cell, so that you can optimize your cellular health properly. Oh, I really do love that one, actually.
So there's a good few there that you use. I'm just trying to unpick that. Some of the GI ones I find absolutely fascinating, but I understand that they don't pick up some of the... So, for example, some people can have candida, but it won't pick it up because obviously it'll form colonies within the colon, so you might not get it on one pass, on one fecal pass, for example. But then if you're picking it up in urine as well, then that's extremely interesting. And you mentioned oxalates. For listeners that don't know, oxalates are found in a bunch of different foods, including leafy greens, for example, very high in leafy greens. And some people can have a different difficulty excreting them. And like you mentioned before, Tim, it can lead to things like kidney stones, for example, or certainly one type of them. And the organic acids test, that has came up before. Marek Doyle actually said the same thing in terms of what's incredibly useful at certainly predicting what's going on in the human body in relation to gut health. And we've talked about gut hyperpermeability on the podcast before. People can go look at the podcast with Ben Brown as well for more information with that. And then the genes, just to round everything all off that you said, like something which is really common is like a SNP in the MTHFR gene. Which can cause like numerous different problems, but including like people can't properly convert folic acid into methyl. I'm gonna completely get this wrong now. Tetrahydrofolate, 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, eventually. I've not said that in ages. And that can be a real problem for people. Have you experienced anything like that before in terms of the methylation cycle?
Yeah, it's a big part of the genetic testing for me. Actually, one of my favorite things to optimize. It's more commonly known nowadays. When I first got into it, not many people had really discussed it. There wasn't really much on forums or anything either. Actually, Marek's a good friend of mine. I actually work with Marek as one of my sounding boards / opinions on things that I work on. I have a team of about 4 or 5 people I work with. Marek Doyle is one of them. Dr. Scott Scher is another one. He's a big name in hyperbaric oxygen therapy from the States. He's a very dear friend of mine. Dr. Dominic Nichwitz, who's the biological dentist. Ryan Carter, who's Levite. And Dr. Harpel over at Harpel Clinic as well. Those are basically my my team, should I say, for my health and sounding board. So I don't do anything without a chat group between us all. MTHFR came up with Marek many years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, I think, originally. And I do have the SNP, which means that I detox at around 40% less than I should do. And optimizing my B12, which is why I actually did a subcutaneous B12 shot just at the beginning of this podcast when we were preparing, because I like to optimize my B12. I
It
also
was a
take...
unique way to start a podcast, I have to admit.
My schedule is running behind, and I have to tick these things off in order, otherwise my day falls back. But yeah, and then optimize methylfolate, B12, and trimethylglycine, which is probably my favorite supplement. One of my favorite top 3 supplements of all time. So if you've got the MTHFR gene, then trimethylglycine often works very, very well for energy production. And if you take it before sleep, you find that it really does help your deep sleep and heart rate variability as well. So it's really good.
That's really good to know. Why do you think it does both in terms of wake you up and also help you sleep?
Well, not wake you up, but more about energy production. So if you think about your methylation process and energy production, for instance, think of you having a swimming pool full of water, okay? And that pool of water is your energy stores. Now, think about emptying that swimming pool with a straw, having a straw and it's just constantly just peeing out slowly. That's your energy utilization. Now, if you take trimethylglycine and you're an undermethylator, you've got one of those SNPs, then taking trimethylglycine will open that straw up to be more like a hose pipe. So it just helps you utilize the energy that you've already got that isn't flowing properly. So a lot of people just suddenly wake up with it and go, my God, I feel like I did before I got ill, or, I don't consider energy to be a thing anymore, because, when people are normal, they don't go, oh, I've got good energy today. They just are. Whereas people that have had fatigue or tired will go, oh, I've got good energy today. So, if you don't know it as a concept, trimethylglycine won't do anything for you because you probably haven't got an energy problem. Whereas if you are fatigued or have had, lethargy quite a lot, then trimethylglycine will help with that. So that's on the energy side. On the sleeping side, glycine is known to be good for sleep and has many processes in the body. Trimethyl, it's got 3 methyl groups on there, which helps the whole methylation cycle. So it gives the body what it needs to be able to come out of fight or flight mode, in my opinion, which then obviously helps heart rate reduce and heart rate variability going up. So therefore, the body's just in a more rested state because it's able to deal with a lot of the chemical processes that it's supposed to do. That's my belief. And actually, I discussed this with Marek at length on a call recently. And we're both in the same place with it. So it's great.
Yeah, that is. I'm definitely going to have to dive into that more. You've probably highlighted the fact that I need to do a podcast on MTHFR just for people that are not familiar with it, because it's more common than people think. I think it's 30% of the population have got some form of SNP, which causes
40% apparently.
40?
Yeah.
I remember it being around that number. And Marek is such an intelligent individual. I believe he spoke about you when I called him off the podcast, to be fair. But yeah,
really,
yeah, funny.
Bromance.
I think he's because he spoke at the Health Optimisation Summit. So when I was talking about that, your name came up. Because obviously it was obvious that you knew each other anyway. But yeah, very intelligent individual. But yeah, definitely a bromance, I imagine.
He's far down the rabbit hole in all the metabolic processes and pathways, whereas I'm more of a curator of other people's content and talk slightly higher level than the details so that it's more accessible to people. Just get people to think in, think about these connections opposed to the actual specific pathways of everything. This is just where I sit in terms of my abstract to detail level. America is far much more detailed and smarter than me. Differently smart.
Yeah, I know there are different forms of intelligence, aren't there? And I think the fact that you're utilizing all these different people as tools, as a biohacker, I think, shows that you are doing exactly what you preach.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Something which I wanted to speak to you about also, and we were talking about sleep before, which I imagine ties quite well into this, is productivity and biohacking. Now, I earlier on, probably whilst I was a student, got really interested in the topic of nootropics and also ketosis for productivity and cognitive function. Now, I actually found that going into ketosis was hugely beneficial for me for productivity and cognitive function, even though I don't really have any identifiable health cognitive issues or brain issues, which I found quite interesting. I wouldn't recommend it for everyone. I certainly did. I thought it was like the only way forward ages ago, and I now think intermittent use of ketosis can be quite beneficial. But again, it depends on your own personal health circumstances. Have you found the same, or what do you use to kind of help with productivity? And maybe we should rewind back a little bit and just not start with supplements, and maybe just in general strategizing your day.
God.
Have I opened a whole can of worms here? Should we start with supplements?
Well, I don't know where to start with that.
Oh, okay.
First of all, let's just go with the ketosis first of all. So first of all, ketosis is great as an intervention for short-term use or on a cyclical basis. So I did hardcore keto for 12 months, absolutely rock solid keto for 12 months. I hardly came out of ketosis actually, and it was very taxing on the body and on the digestive system. It took my liver a long time to recover from being so stressed because it had to produce so much more bile to be able to disperse the fats that I was eating. Yeah. So it's really put a heavy strain on the liver actually. And that's one area of ketosis that people don't generally talk about. But I was right at the forefront of it with many of these guys. And taking exogenous ketones to boost my levels up and blah, 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 blah. Now, that was good because with my organic acids test, it showed I had high levels of systemic yeast from overuse of antibiotics from years ago, which, natural antifungals and things like that didn't seem to resolve. But after doing a year of ketosis, they all went. So I starved out all the rubbish basically, then had to rebuild my gut and liver back up from that point. So it was good as an experiment, and it's a fun story to talk about. But what it made me realize is that it's not sustainable forever. And when I finally clicked into place about how we evolved and how our ancestors were, and when you say paleo diet or paleo mindset, people often switch off now, unfortunately, because they just think, well, we're not cavemen. And the paleo movement, or should I say the paleo companies that make paleo cookies and things like that, they're not paleo at all. All it means is they're cleaner, but really ancestral health and what we evolved with is where we should find ourselves getting nearer to. So why is ketosis good? Well, ketosis is a fasted state. When you're exercising, you burn fat for energy, and that energy is significantly better than getting it from sugary foods. It's not so easy to access as sugary foods, obviously, but it's essentially so we can eat food, store it as energy if we don't have access to food, and then burn it so that we don't starve and we don't run out of energy. Okay, so that's a very, very basic rule of it. So if you're a caveman, you wake up in the morning, you might have a little bit of fermented food in the cave because you didn't have a fridge, so it fermented, so it's got natural bacteria in it. You would then go off and probably run after an animal and kill it, or climb some trees and grab some fruit or whatever. You would be in a fasted state pretty much. The only thing you'd have access to easily would probably be stream water, which would be high in minerals, which actually helps you with fat burning significantly when you're hydrated. So you would then go away, kill the animal. The only food that you would have is what you could carry with you. And then you'd take your food back to the cave to feed to the wife and the kids, who would then eat as much as they needed to and store the rest in the cave to ferment overnight, maybe have some for dinner as well. Now, what does that say? It says that we wake in the morning, we're fasted. We then break fast with whatever we can kill or pick. We then eat probably lunch and afternoon tea by campfire. And then we wouldn't eat after that all the way through until the next time we killed something or caught it the next day. Some days we would fast completely because we couldn't catch anything and all the fruit would be eaten. We'd have to travel further to get it, i.e. more exercise. And other days we'd have an abundance because we would have killed an animal and we would be able to eat it for 3 days until it started going off. So some days would be fasted, some days wouldn't, some days would be intermittent fasted where you'd eat in a certain time, blah, 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 blah. So that's how we evolved. That gives us gut diversity. We'd also eat seasonally. We'd only be able to eat what was near us at that time of year. We wouldn't be able to eat bananas or pineapples around the clock, which our guts just don't know how to deal with. which is why people get allergies to a lot of food, partly because their gut is damaged, but partly because they're subjecting their body to the same food all year round. So we build up intolerances to it. Whereas when you rotate seasonally, that doesn't happen so much because you don't build up the intolerance to it. So really, when you think about fasting, it is amazing when you're in the gym, you're exercising, you're burning fat, and your brain comes alive because ketone energy is just amazing. It makes you feel like you can take on the world, but it's not for forever. Yeah. So that's a really good nootropic as a result, and your mental clarity does go through the roof. But doing it cyclical, i.e. eating in a window, so I wake at, say, 7:30 every day, maybe a little bit before. I have my binders to assist with my detoxification naturally. And then when I come down and have my bulletproof coffee after my mineral-rich hydration, I would break fast with a bulletproof coffee, which would have MCT oil in it, butter, and actually some collagen as well. So I start feeding, breaking my fast at 8 a.m. But I would finish eating at 6 to 6:30 p.m. latest.
Right.
So therefore you can see that I have, kind of like a 15-hour window of not eating every day. Mm-hmm. Every day, ultimately. And that means that I'm in and out of ketosis on a daily basis. It also means that my organs aren't running at full speed when I'm sleeping, meaning that I'm not trying to get energy from my food while I'm sleeping. I'm using the energy that I've collected during the day to help my sleep, which, also works very, very well. So all of these tiny little tweaks add up to being massive wins, compounded interest style, I guess, by all these micro decisions add up to be a maximum output in terms of optimization. So that helps mental clarity, because people with the worst brain fog generally have the worst gut. They're processing lots of sugar, they're spiking their blood glucose throughout the day a lot, blah, 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 blah. So they need to take lots of nootropics. But when you nail that right, you don't need a lot of nootropics. And then when you do want nootropics, and I stack multiple ones. So for instance, I like methylene blue, which is...
not readily available here, that one.
Yeah, it is. I won't say the sources, but it's not illegal or anything, so it's fine. But methylene blue, make sure it's pharmaceutical quality. There is a brand called Transcriptions that I love that you can buy from functionalself.co.uk and Pure Health Supplements as well. But methylene blue I like aniracetam, phenylpiracetam, oxiracetam, all these things, part of the racetam group. They basically mean that you use choline, your brain uses choline better. And choline's known as a nootropic, natural nootropic. Aniracetam helps your body use that at a better rate, which means that gives you good mental clarity as well.
Yeah, the racetam family were incredibly interesting. I remember looking these up whilst I was studying, in terms of they were originally used, I think they're used in Russia primarily, but they're used for, or they've certainly been tested for Alzheimer's models in animals, and also some human trials as well, with pretty good efficacy. Certainly in terms of memory and concentration.
Yeah, it's a very, very good drug. I mean, a lot of speakers, surgeons, people I know actually like piracetam, and you can actually get pharmaceutical grade one of that. There's one I like from America that's called ultra racetam. That's a stack of different racetams together. I find that works beautifully. And I stack various other things as well. There's natural ones. There's Mindscopic, which is a brand actually I invited to exhibit at the summit. Mindscopic are more natural nootropics. They do 5-HTP one, which is obviously good for boosting serotonin naturally. And they do one with alpha GPC, which is a form of choline, the most bioavailable form of choline. They have some B12 in there and L-theanine and a few other bits. So, and some NADH as well, I think. So, there's various nootropics you can stack. So when I do it properly, and I generally take 3 or 4 of those together and then stick on my HapB device as well, and stick that on focus, and then productivity goes through the roof. Next thing I know, it's like 6-8 hours later, and I've done a significant amount of work.
Well, that is definitely a targeted approach. I've definitely messed around with more the kind of top level entry level ones, I should say, with like L-tyrosine, alpha GPC, a lot of the kind of choline, L-carnitine, things like that. But nothing too in depth. Phosphatidylserine is something which I really like, and that seems to modulate cortisol pretty well, which is the reason why I got into it. And also there's some of the adaptogens. I've spoken about some of them on before, like rhodiola rosea.
Yeah, that's nice as well. I mean, the thing is with all these supplements, proper supplements, not medications, they are fueling deficiencies in some way.
Yes.
So, for instance, alpha GPC, choline. It might be that you're not eating enough eggs, for instance, or you're deficient in choline. Therefore, supplementing with choline will fuel a deficiency and help the neurotransmitters fire as they should do. And then if you want to turbocharge it, using something like aniracetam will help your body use it at a greater rate, quicker. So, you're fueling deficiencies. Rhodiola has various other things as well, which can fuel deficiencies and whatnot. So this is why some things work for some people and not for others. But there are some, like modafinil, which is a dirty drug in my opinion, but Dave Asprey really loved it for many years.
Why do you consider it a dirty drug? Because for people that don't know, it's used for narcolepsy primarily.
Yeah, I think it's a dirty nootropic. Personally, I'm not a fan. It makes me a bit jittery. How I would imagine a line of cocaine to feel like. Had I ever done that when I was in my teens as a stupid idiot, but whatever. Not saying I have. And it just makes me feel a bit jittery and horrible, actually. Whereas something like aniracetam and phenylpiracetam are much more natural based. They're not completely natural, but they are much more natural. So I'm not a fan of modafinil for that reason. It's a strong pharmaceutical.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And just to clarify for the listeners, like when we're using these supplements, like as you said, Tim, they are supplements. We're using them for a specific purpose at a specific time at a specific dose. We're not just taking them in ridiculous quantities. And I think to do this as well, like you said, you are fueling deficiencies, so people can often use supplements and not really be that read up on them, and actually probably cause more harm than good, which I think is an important point to say as well.
Yeah, it's a bloody awesome point. I remember working with one of the most senior functional doctors that there are in the UK, actually, very dear friend of mine. And she said to me, tell me your history when I first met her, and ran through all the gut cleanses and detoxes and things like that I'd done. And, I'd done about 5 or 6 different gut cleanses. I'd done the hummer worm herbs for killing the parasites, and I'd done 30-day juice diet, Jason Vale juice diet, and all these things, various other things. And she's like, you might as well have just drunk Dettol. She's obviously not telling me to drink it, but she said, with the amount of stuff that you put down your throat, along with things like oregano oil, enteric coated oregano oil tablets for several months at a time. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just taking everything.
That is a strong antimicrobial that would kill lots of stuff off.
Yeah, exactly. She's like, you might as well have just basically bleached your gut. So you've done done damage, but at the same point you've progressed so well that you've ultimately helped yourself, but you could have done it a lot quicker had you have known what to do in a targeted fashion. And when you can't quantify things, as it goes back to our point from earlier, when you can't quantify things and you're just doing things based on intuition and guesswork, or who shouts the loudest about a specific cleanse, you're just guessing. Whereas when you've got the data, if I'd known then by 2 tests, here's your organic acids, here's your yeast levels, and here's the bacteria that you're missing, I would have just done the cleanses that I needed to do so, using the right herbs or whatnot to kill off the bad bacteria and replace the specific bacteria. Now, a lot of these things weren't readily available then, and definitely were 3 to 5 times the price that they are nowadays, because it was nearly 10 years ago. So it just shows how testing, being targeted, can help you win the race a lot quicker. I think one other point is that there's why this is important is there's I'm trying to remember if it was cycling or rowing. I think it was the cycling team. And there was a cycling team and they weren't performing as they wanted to, but they wanted to win. And so they each, so their coach basically improved their saddle by 1%. And they improved the pedals by 1%. And they made sure that the brakes were completely dust-free every day. You know, like all these things, all these little 1% here, there, and everywhere. And it added up to them absolutely smashing targets because all these tiny little 1% everywhere added up together to be a significant win. And it's the same when you're testing and optimizing in a targeted way in multiple places, that you can get these big wins quickly, opposed to I'm not sleeping, therefore have a sleeping tablet. Yes. Alternatively, you know, why aren't you sleeping? What are we doing in the environment that isn't right? What's your stress levels like? What's your blue light like? You know, all these different things, opposed to just take this drug, which actually has an impact on the body in a negative way as well. So yeah, that's why testing and not just using your intuition really does round well for these things, because you can have negative effects and do yourself damage if you're not super smart about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you've just highlighted a key point when, you know, when in doubt, I think the best thing to do is, you know, save up and just speak to a practitioner about these things and use a targeted approach, because the likelihood is you're going to solve the issue in a much quicker and safer way rather than just going at it by yourself. And like you said, you did all these different things, and I assume you were learning throughout this entire process and then came to this practitioner and she was like, what have you done?
Yeah. I mean, I could have saved myself 5 years. And a lot of pain.
Wow.
And
5 years,
while I'm really happy with the journey and where I find myself today, running the summit and working on various projects with, you know, some of the biggest names that there are, and I'm so flattered and grateful for the journey. You know, there's been some dark days where I couldn't leave the house for days on end. You know, where I just couldn't think straight, or you know, couldn't get off the toilet because I was going 10, 15 times a day, or going pee 30 to 50 times a day. There's some dark days, but looking back, it really has built me to be something different to what I was beforehand, which I'm very grateful for. But if I could have shortened that by 5 years, I'd be very happy. So the smart people do it strategically using what we have today. But at the same token, you know, a lot of people don't realize that there's so much support out there. And, you know, 10 years ago, there wasn't people on Instagram sharing these little snippets every day that can, you know, just open your eyes to, it's not just the doctors that you should listen to. You should listen to a variety of people. And there wasn't so much functional medicine out there. There wasn't people like Dr. Mark Hyman, and Dave Asprey wasn't so prominent then. And, you know, Dr. Chatterjee wasn't talking about a lot of these things that are now coming mainstream as well. So people need to know that there is support out there and that they can turn to a functional medicine practitioner to help them speed these things up. Whereas 10 years ago, I think it was nowhere near as accessible as it is now.
Yeah, no, I entirely agree. And you just mentioned Dr. Chatterjee, and he's making huge waves, especially with his book. I think, what was it, the 4-pillar plan? And then he brought the one out about stress. So like the kind of stress, sleep, exercise, relationships, and nutrition. I mean, all those things are like should be the pillars of health, and then everything else that we've been talking about today can just add on to that, and you can definitely biohack those as well, of course. But I think we just from a basic level, you know, people just not having the right pillar, for example, can dramatically affect their well-being.
Yeah, totally.
So, like we've spoken about, you've had a lot of experience in this area and have had a lot of friends in this health space. But it seems to me that there is always roadblocks to success. People go through like yo-yo dieting, or, you know, starting right, for example, within the new year, New Year's resolution, always going to the gym and then falling off the wagon 2 weeks later. How have you kind of overcome these roadblocks, and what are the common roadblocks to success that you've seen?
Thinking that you can do everything all in one go is one thing. I mean, one thing that strikes me as a commonality is that a lot of biohackers or people that are ill, the motivation is high, therefore they do whatever they have to do to fix themselves. So if they hear about 5 different supplements and 5 different things, they do it all at the same time, and they have such an impact on each other. They try to do too much in one go. It's best to be really targeted. Like, for instance, when I do something, I do it properly. For instance, my binders. I recently reading about the importance of binders, especially with what I'm working on at the moment. So instead of just adding one binder in, which don't really have a negative effect on the body as long as you're hydrated properly, I take 3 or 4 at one time, but I don't work on brain fog. I don't work on binders for the gut and liver support, as well as this, and this, because you can't gauge where you're at. So I think, and also then you don't go off and buy 5 supplements and 2 new devices and throw loads of different things out. You change one thing at a time. So if you want to optimize your sleep, you try blue blockers first and you get a week or two's worth of data. And then you try the supplement at a different time of day to see how it improves your health and so on and so forth, opposed to just going, I'm going to do 10 different things. What strikes me is a story of one of my friends, actually. He had had gut issues for many years and he'd had lethargy and various other things going on. And he was trying 4 or 5 different things and he could never quite nail any of them. So I just told him to drop everything and just work on, maybe focus on his gut, which is what he did. He went and saw a specialist about his gut and worked on his gut solely until that was done, ticked off onto the next thing. So I think that's the biggest roadblock and issue that people have. The other thing is also finding good practitioners, functional practitioners that know what they're talking about, that actually know things like optimizing your mouth. And that's not just obviously oral microbiome, it's getting rid of cavitations or metal fillings and whatnot, knowing a functional doctor that will actually recommend that, because I find a lot of them just say, oh yeah, as long as you haven't got metal in the mouth, that's fine. But if you've got root canals, they don't necessarily think that's an issue. Well, if it's a big issue in my opinion. So finding a practitioner that really knows the full spectrum of all of these things is hard work, especially when the way that the medical system works is that doctors, if they speak out too loud about something that's not traditional, then they can lose their license. So they're always in fear of that. Whereas if you work with a functional nutritionist, for instance, they can recommend some things, but not necessarily the medical side of things. So they've got their hands tied. So I think the roadblock is not having access to a lot of these good guys. And if you do, then, you need to get 2 or 3 of them in a group so you can discuss it from all angles, all biases, as discussed earlier.
Absolutely wise words, I think. Something which I'd be interested in, because you've been on this journey for a long time now. If you could send a message to your past, what would present day Tim tell Tim from 10 years ago?
Nature first, supplements and medicine second. Paleo mindset, how we evolved gives us the best data for millennia because we survived to this point. So understanding that, and then spending more time finding a good functional doctor, and investing in a functional medicine doctor and the right support would save you a lot of money on supplements and a lot of time as well, and help your earning potential. So it's a wise cost.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Tim, we're coming up on time, and I asked 3 questions to nearly everyone that comes on the show, with the first being, how can healthcare be integrated with some of the modalities that we've spoken about today?
Well, as my friend from Denmark says, be the CEO of your own health.
Right.
If the CEO is responsible for the whole company and for its performance, and how good the CEO is generally how well the company performs, which is why companies' stock value go up when they have a new CEO that's particularly good, for instance. You have to take ownership of it, opposed to just palming it off to someone else and expect someone else. You should have advisors like a CEO does, or advisors like the president does, and you make your own choices, not just listen to one opinion. It's about minimizing risk and maximizing efficacy. And so being the own CEO of your health, depending on what you've got going on, is important. Work with a functional doctor, work with a functional nutritionist, research on biohackers and what's working, read alternative viewpoints from people like Dave Asprey and Dr Mercola and things like that, and don't go, I don't agree, or yes, I completely agree. Say, okay, how relevant is this to me, and what can I learn from it? Be open to both sides of it. And I think if you take ownership for yourself, opposed to your doctor saying, I don't know, there's nothing I can do to help you, and then feeling lost and spiraling out of control, taking it and going, okay, here's the problem, what's the solution, and figuring it out is absolutely critical. So I think too many people rely on the standard GP and therefore don't get helped and get stuck in the system, opposed to exploring and figuring a lot of this stuff out. And you know, we're connected to everyone on the planet now. We can just speak to anyone and everyone if you work hard enough to do so. And so therefore pretty much everything is fixable if you just have the right mindset.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Powerful. I think just using the wide variety of healthcare practices and modalities out there, like you've outlined, is absolutely
100%.
key.
Yeah.
What has been the most impactful? I mean, this is probably going to be quite a hard question now I think about it, but what has been the most impactful health change that you've made in your life, and why? If you could pick one.
Well, I would say probably blue blocking glasses would be the number one biohack. Understanding the paleo mindset, not necessarily the diet, but, you know, eating clean, low toxin food, grass-fed, organic meat, you know, that type of thing, getting grounding with your shoes off in the garden, making sure that you're getting enough natural light and instead there's too much blue light so that you're obviously producing energy correctly. Eating for what you need, and also the final thing would be optimizing your mouth. That's get rid of any root canal treated teeth because they're just toxic, in my opinion. Getting any metal fillings taken out, and optimizing your oral microbiome, because if you're trying to fix your gut without first optimizing your oral microbiome, which has significantly more bacteria in it than the gut, then, you know, your gut's never going to be optimized properly. So, you know, there's things like leaky gut opposed to leaky gums instead of leaky gut. Well, if your mouth is not right, then the gut's not going to be either. So, yeah, the paleo mindset, optimizing your mouth, and incorporating nature.
Well, I think you've just given the listeners 3 tips rather than the most impactful change in your life. But I'll definitely accept that. Tim, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, my friend. But before you go, can you please tell the listeners where they can find you and what exciting projects that you have coming up?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram at Tim Biohacker, and I update every single day, and with usually things that I've tried on myself or whatnot. So that's where I'm most active. My company is Health Optimisation Summit, which is obviously happening this September in London. With people like Dr Mercola, Dave Asprey, Vishen from Mind Valley, Gerard Pollock, and all of these big names in the health space.
Huge names.
So, yeah. At Health Optimisation Summit on Instagram and Facebook and just about everywhere on the internet. And yeah.
Awesome. Tim, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. It's definitely opened my eyes to a few things. You've given me a lot more to read about. Whether that's a good thing or it's something which I'm going to find quite onerous is yet to be decided. But thank you very much for your time. I hugely appreciate it, mate. And
no worries.
Hopefully we can do this again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Functional Health Podcast. You can find links to everything that we talked about today in the show notes. If you have a second, please consider leaving a 5-star rating on iTunes. It really does make a huge difference and helps get this valuable information out and reach more people. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up to date and know whenever I release a new episode. You can connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, or our website, and all questions are welcome. As always, thanks to Josh Aurelia for the editing and Alan Harper for his support.